You have a way with money. Yes, you. You plan for your future every day. Yet, most women don't take an active role in long-term finances. And involvement is only dropping with the next generation. Even though 8 out of 10 women will need to manage their money alone one day. So while women are making strides, now more than ever, why aren't they taking their seat at the money table? You're already there, because if you use money, you understand money. If you can save money, you can invest money. Money can bring freedom to challenge, to change, to choose. And there's nothing more exciting than making your own dream a reality. So make your move. Take action. Big or small, everything counts. Make your money move.
Let me give you a little insight on UBS. I choose to be here simply because of the people. We are a truly global wealth management firm. We have all of the products and resources, whether it's investment management, financial planning, our focus on women, athletes and entertainers, or the next generation. But at the end of the day, it's the people. We care about one another, from senior leadership to the branch employees to the back office. We know the client is at the center of everything we do, and we strive to make sure our advisors have those resources to deliver that to the client.
The thing I love about UBS is it has allowed me to grow my practice on my own terms. They recognize that there's not a cookie cutter approach to becoming a successful financial advisor. And while we are a global firm, we are nimble and focused on providing solutions to meet our individual clients' needs, improve their lives, and creating legacies for generations to come. I'm really proud to work for a company like UBS that is prioritizing its efforts to be as inclusive as possible and is committed to providing career opportunities for its employees. It's really important to me that the company I work for has its values aligned with mine.
UBS has provided me a platform to build my practice my way. I'm a marathon runner, I'm not a sprinter. So I've built my practice over time, and I'm really proud of my personal brand. Aside from my practice, UBS has enabled me to participate in a digital sprint, as well as help the women's segment, as well as the small business segments.
UBS creates a fair playing field for both men and women. I found that I've had every opportunity to excel at this firm and given opportunities to grow in my position.
I've been with UBS and the predecessor firms for 32 years. Our most valuable asset is our people. The firm's goal is to deliver value directly to our clients. We offer diversity of expertise and abundance of perspective.
UBS is very well known in Asia for its unique, tailored investment. And that really benefits my clients to have a diversified portfolio. UBS supports women strongly and help me to develop and grow in my business. The management team is spending a lot of time and effort to make sure the woman advisor to be successful in this field. I feel very fortunate to work in such a dynamic company.
Why UBS? I've been in this business for over 3 decades. I think I kind of have an idea of what's important. At UBS, there are magnificent amounts of resources, smart people, creative people, and we care. The compassion we bring to every day and all of our clients' needs is really important and integral to what we do. UBS is big enough and small enough, and it's just right.
UBS has this incredible focus on clients and the advisors and teams that support them. And they do that in a variety of ways: culture, education, and in particular education focused on women's needs and priorities. And as a result of that, it allows me and my team to feel valued and respected and it allows me to be in a wonderful vocation, working for a wonderful firm.
I'm actually more interested in the practice than I was years ago when it was really just trying to put some food on the table. And now it's also giving me the opportunity to bring my daughter into the business, which is something I never would have even thought of. I mean, when I started, it was a very long time ago. You have to understand, I was 24, barely could find my way to the office. I was the lady broker. They didn't know quite how long they'd have to put up with. And here I am 40 years later with a whole beautiful practice that's intergenerational, Northern California, Southern California. I never would have thought that I could have so much fun at work.
I really enjoyed working in the finance industry, specifically working as an investment consultant and providing advice to clients. I think being a woman is actually an advantage because there are less women. Working at UBS has been great because they are very supportive of female advisors. They're looking to grow that segment because they acknowledge that many of the decision makers with respect to finances are women. And people like to work with people that are like them.
At UBS, I can give the care and attention that my clients deserve with the capabilities of a global powerhouse. I leverage UBS resources to empower women, including those going through a major life transition, such as a divorce or loss of a loved one. Our thought leadership inspires women to lead their family and community forward. I'm so thankful to be a part of UBS.
I have great appreciation for the scope of resources that UBS has provided our team and our clients. UBS, as the largest wealth manager, has brought us access to global research, investment solutions, and excellent technology. To be able to impact people's lives in the way that we can as a financial advisor is truly remarkable. It gives you a real sense of accomplishment and peace of mind that you've done the right thing for so many families and individuals.
I'm very proud to have worked for UBS for the past 20 years. The caliber of people that UBS employs has been always impressive. I know that our clients are well taken care of and that UBS has the support and the resources to be able to take care of them.
The culture at UBS is really special and it's unique in that it's very familial. Everything starts with the relationship. It's the advisor's relationship with the clients, the branch manager's relationship with the advisors, and by extension, their clients. I have been incredibly blessed here at UBS to have both great male and female mentors. Everybody is very supportive, both internally and externally. Internally, we have affinity groups and networking groups for women to join where they feel they have a support network around them, and that's made a big difference. Externally, we're very focused on making sure that we deliver relevant insights and experiences to women where they too feel that sense of community, but also feel empowered to take on not just their financial present, but their financial future.
What a lovely video. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the historic Julia Morgan Ballroom. I haven't seen it this full in 18 months, so it's so great to see all of you and to see you in person. I also want to extend special greetings to our audience that is watching the live stream through our YouTube channel. I did not know we had a YouTube channel before today, but welcome to Own Your Worth, which is the latest in an ongoing series about women and wealth. My name is Janet Reilly, and I'm the co-owner of the Nob Hill Gazette, and I am so pleased to be able to present this special event today with our partner, UBS Wealth Management. So thank you very much to UBS and for that lovely video. Also, thank you to our generous supporters and friends at Barulich, Dugoni, and Suttmann Law Group and Peninsula Bay Trust. Let's give them a round of applause. As we saw in that video, 8 out of 10 women will be solely responsible for their financial well-being, whether planned or unplanned. So there is no better time than now to make sure that we are all prepared for when that inevitable time comes. So we have put together a terrific panel for you today of experts, of leaders, of founders, of funders, who will talk a little bit about some of the unique opportunities and maybe some of the challenges that we as women face. So it is my great pleasure to now introduce our editor-in-chief at the Nob Hill Gazette. Please welcome Ms. Carey Schwartz. Take it away, Carey.
Thanks, Janet. Can you guys hear me okay? I have a mic on. Yes? Great. Well, it is my pleasure to introduce Carey Shuffman, who is the head of the women's segment at UBS, which she describes as helping women achieve their financial well-being and take their seat at the table, which is something I know that I need a lot of help with. So I feel very lucky to chat with you today. I guess I can just stick this over here. Yeah, thank you so much for coming. Wonderful. Great, so let's get started. I mean, your role just sounds so interesting, so necessary, so relevant in 2021. What does it entail exactly? What does it mean to help women take their seat at the financial table?
Sure, absolutely. Well, again, it's great to be here. This is my second in-person event in the last 2 years, so it's really wonderful to see everyone in person. And really what our team does, so our team is called the Women's Segment, and UBS as a whole, as a firm, is really committed, as we just saw in those videos, to helping women navigate their financial lives and prepare for their financial futures with the ultimate goal of helping women achieve greater financial and hopefully thus overall well-being. We do that through a variety of different ways. We develop intellectual capital and resources to really help meet and address the unique financial needs that women have throughout the course of their lifetimes. What's important to note, and I always say this, what's really been foundational to our approach, though, and it has to be said, is that we at UBS believe that women are a population, not a segment. It's a little bit silly to call 51% of the population a segment. We're all very, very different. And so that's something that really has been critical to our approach, is thinking about the fact that women are a population and looking at instead what are some of the different trends that impact women differently than our male counterparts and might impact different women depending on their life situation, where they are career-wise, whatever it might be. And so as we just heard, there's one trend that's pretty staggering that has really influenced much of what we've done, which is that 8 in 10 women in the US will find themselves at some point fully in charge of managing their financial life. This is due to a variety of different things. The fact that women tend to outlive men on average by about 5 years. The divorce rate in the US hovers just below 50%. And of course, there's many women who choose not to get married, and marriage rates are actually decreasing as well. So all of that, as well as the really promising side around women and wealth, has gone into what we do. So women actually control $10 trillion in wealth in the US, according to McKinsey, and are on track to control an additional $20 trillion in the next decade, which is really, really terrific. And so our goal is to really understand that and look at how women approach the major financial decisions in their lives, and how we can help them take their seat at the money table or support those women who are already at the table.
Right. I'm struck when you say women have their own set of financial needs. Can you talk a little bit about what those look like, how they might differ from their male counterparts?
Sure, absolutely. So I think what's really important, again, if we think about those trends that I just mentioned, thinking about how are women different than their male counterparts, and how are each of us different from one another, right? So there are trends that tend to impact women differently. We know, for example, that women tend to make less than their male counterparts. So how does that impact women's savings over time? We know that women tend to live longer than men, so their savings needs to stretch for a longer period of time. And then I think what's really most important to note is through the research that we've done, which is called Own Your Worth, the name of tonight's event, is that in speaking with thousands and thousands of women, we've spoken with women who have gone through a divorce, who have been widowed, who are married, who are single, women business owners, millennials, Gen X, baby boomers, women from all different backgrounds and financial situations, that a large number of women, regardless of where they are in their lives, tell us that when it comes to making long-term financial decisions, they aren't as comfortable or as confident in making those decisions.
And in couples, and in particular in heterosexual couples, about half of women in the US and around the world actually tell us that they are not involved in those long-term financial decisions. So a lot of what we do in terms of meeting and addressing the unique financial needs that women have is helping women actually take control of their wealth and their future by being more involved in those important decisions.
So necessary. I mean, I would describe it as like being thrown into the deep end, having had no idea how to deal with my finances, and then suddenly finding myself an adult, independent woman. So I just think the work you're doing is so important and so necessary. So I definitely want to come back to this research. I think there's a lot of really interesting findings, but let's talk about you for a second. You've really carved out a niche for yourself in the field of women and wealth and the intersection of the two. What initially drew you to this space, and where do you find inspiration to keep moving forward?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you know, like many of the women you saw in the videos, I have been very fortunate to have spent my entire decade-plus career at UBS. And when this opportunity came about, it was, you know, it seemed like the dream opportunity to really focus on the topic of women's financial well-being. And I have to credit UBS with that, because from the get-go, UBS said, we want to make it our mission to really understand and help women investors, whoever they might be, whatever they might look like, wherever they might be in their financial life. And so that really enabled me and my team and all of the people with whom we work, including, you know, the Northern California office of UBS, to really do just that with the research that we've been able to do for many years, the resources. We have an entire financial education website that we've built. And it's also, you know, it's not just professional, it's personal too. I think about, you know, when we as women are able to have a say in the decisions that impact our futures, everybody wins. And I think no matter how you look at it, whether you are actively involved in your financial life, you love investing, or you're not so keen on it, or you haven't really been interested in it, money influences so much of what we're able to do in our lives, whether we like it or not, good and bad, in terms of whether we're able to, you know, pay and buy that dream home, or pay for an unforeseen health event, or, you know, care for aging loved ones. And just seeing it in my own circle, I think, has also really helped influence what we actually do at UBS, whether it's watching people navigate their careers or start a family, or, you know, I even think about my own grandmother. When my grandfather passed away 5 years ago, she had never written a check. And so helping her navigate her own financial life for the first time. And you know, now she's incredibly involved. She's calling me and saying, you know, hey, I have this annuity and this is what, and watching her evolution was really incredible, but she was also 83 when that happened. And it was a really steep learning curve. So I think that if we can help prepare women for that what if moment well in advance, I think that's really our ultimate goal.
It's a fantastic goal. So going back to the research for a minute, so you found that it's 2021, but women are still not actively engaged in their finances. Like you mentioned, so many women kind of defer to their husband or the man in their life. Did the research explore why this is the case? What's holding women back? Can you talk a little bit about why this sort of troubling trend is persisting?
Yeah, absolutely. So in our Own Your Worth research, we've spoken with thousands and thousands of women and men. We've spoken with women in both heterosexual and same-sex couples, as well as single women. And again, as I mentioned, we continue to find that about 50% of women in heterosexual couples and 40% of women in same-sex couples tell us that they opt out of those long-term financial decisions and defer to their spouse or partner. And when I say long-term, I mean investing, financial planning, retirement planning. Less so, in fact, we actually find that women are very involved in the shorter-term financial decisions, managing the family's expenses, bill paying, things like that. It's those longer-term decisions that we're really referring to. And when we looked at why, of course, that was the natural question when we started to see the data emerge. It really came down to, at least among women in couples, 4 key reasons. The first is this concept of falling into traditional gender roles, which again, when you look at the tremendous advances that women are making, whether in climbing the corporate ladder in their communities, in the public and private sector, it's surprising that at home, at least according to our research, many women told us, truth be told, and this is a direct quote from our research, truth be told, I'd rather be taken care of. And men in turn said, I feel it's my duty to provide that sense of financial security to my wife, to my partner. So that was one reason, is this sort of falling into traditional gender roles. And our research looked at really interesting things. We asked, who pays when you go out on dates and social settings, all of those things getting into the gender dynamics that exist. The second reason is time constraints, which I think resonates with every single person anywhere, male or female. We're all so busy. COVID has only exacerbated all of that. And so many women said, we take a divide and conquer approach in our household, and that's just not something that I handle, which also leads to the third reason, which was sort of this complacency around many women, actually over 80% of women who were not involved said, I'm not really interested. I'd rather not have to deal with the finances. It's a burden, it's a chore. And then the last was keeping the peace. So not wanting to cause arguments or stress, which is actually ironic because in the research that we did with couples who share equally in making those long-term decisions, they actually said that they felt more satisfied in their financial life and that they fought less about money. So many women told us they're not actively engaging because they want to keep the peace, but when we actually looked at women in couples where they were sharing, the peace was being kept and that they were fighting less about money, which we know is a big stressor no matter what the situation.
And that's an unfortunate gender norm to fall back on anyway, is the idea of a woman as the peacekeeper and maintaining equilibrium and steadiness. I mean, we should be part of these conversations.
Absolutely.
So, go ahead. Yeah.
The one thing I'd also mention is, I think that this goes way back beyond even the research that we've done over the last 5 years. You look at the societal context, the industry context around finance, and even the historical context. I mean, it wasn't until 1974 that the Equal Credit Opportunity Act was passed that made it so that women no longer needed a male cosigner to apply for credit. I mean, that was less than 50 years ago. And so when you think about that, even for millennial women, if they grew up with parents who maybe fell into more traditional gender roles, the cycle sort of continues and continues despite all the tremendous advances that we're making.
I did not know that about the act. That's astounding, actually.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned the pandemic kind of reinforcing these traditional roles with women, just the burden falling on them to take care of the home while their kids are home, and while things have kind of fallen into the domestic sphere a little bit more. Your team did some research around these sort of traditional roles and how finances played into that. Can you talk a little bit about what you found?
Sure. So one of the things that we had the unique opportunity and privilege to do over the last very difficult 18 months is actually speak with women and men here in the US around what the pandemic meant for them and their households. And we asked women sort of what the impact of COVID had been personally, professionally, and financially. And there's also, there's been a ton of research on this well beyond what UBS has done. We know that the pandemic has disproportionately impacted women, and even more so women of color. We know that it's caused, so many of us to take on more household responsibilities, but the research that we did further emphasized that. So our findings were sort of, congruous with what is out there. So women told us overwhelmingly that they had fallen into more traditional gender roles because of COVID, that they had taken on more of the cooking, cleaning, childcare, household responsibilities, while interestingly, men told us that they had taken on more of the yard work and the finances. So again, that sort of personal impact of COVID. Professionally, also very interesting, the majority of women did say if they were working outside the home that they felt COVID had negatively impacted their careers for a variety of reasons, whether because they had to put pay raises or promotions on hold, reduce hours to step out of the workforce entirely or partially, or delay retirement even. And then financially, we did hear from women that COVID-19 has made them really rethink their financial lives and want to protect themselves and their loved ones more than ever before, which I think, I'd like to think about that in a positive way in terms of what that means moving forward. Women told us they were having more financial conversations at home, whether with their partner or spouse or other family members, more than ever before, and that they really wanted to rethink and revisit their financial situation, their financial plan, key documents like their wills or estate plans, powers of attorney, healthcare proxies, things like that. So those were some of the things that we learned sort of on the personal side, the professional side, and the financial side. One other thing I'll just mention, I think as we sort of all think about this return to office, which is top of mind for many companies, and on top of mind, I think, for many, many people. The one interesting thing that was sort of a silver lining, if you will, from all of this is that we did hear from women who were able to work remotely, that they really felt that they were more productive and had greater flexibility in being able to work remotely. And the large majority of all women, and in particular millennials, said that they hoped to be able to have that flexibility and work remotely more often, even well beyond when the pandemic hopefully subsides.
It's an interesting paradox then. So you have these traditional gender roles being reinforced in the home, but then you also have women seemingly for the first time really wanting to focus on their finances and really wanting to kind of rethink how things had been done. So when your team looks towards solutions then, I mean, how do we even begin to bring more women into the fold if I'm a woman, you know, at home saying, I am paralyzed by my lack of knowledge about this, but I want that to change?
Yeah.
Where does change come from?
It's a great question, and I think the first thing is, you know, you mentioned the word paralyzed, and I think there's this misperception that exists when it comes to finances that doesn't really exist anywhere else, insofar as there's this misperception that you have to be an expert to be meaningfully involved, that you have to, you know, watch CNBC or read all the financial journals or know how to calculate a bond yield, and that's not the case. And I think that a lot of that comes down to our role in the financial industry, but also all of us to think about what does it actually mean to be financially engaged, because I think it means something different than what many people think it does. It's really about knowing your own personal financial situation, you know, asking yourself a series of questions. What's most important to you? What are your goals now, maybe in the next few years and into the future? What keeps you up at night? That's a big one. What concerns you, and who are the people that matter most to you? And no one can answer those questions better than you, and no one knows your life better than you do. And so I think if we can sort of reframe the financial conversation to be more about our own personal goals and how we're going to achieve them, or our own personal concerns and how we're going to allay them with our financial life, I think that's a great place to start. And then again, starting small. You don't have to do everything at once. You don't have to go, you know, meet with a financial advisor and develop an entire financial plan in a matter of a week. Start small. You know, if you're working, are you contributing the right amount to your 401k to get the company match? Is it allocated in a way that makes sense for where you are in your life? Have you sat down with your partner or spouse and had a conversation about money and finances, and not just the day-to-day of, you know, vacations or, you know, expenses for children or the mortgage, but long-term? You know, have you asked yourself, if something happened to me or to people I love tomorrow, would we be okay? And of course you wouldn't be okay broadly, but the last burden you'd want to deal with is the financial. So those are all different ways, you know, looking at your net worth, so your assets compared to your liabilities, so what you have versus what you owe, your debt, as well as your income, so what's coming in versus your spending, to kind of get that full picture of your financial life and see where there are opportunities and where there are maybe some gaps. I think those are all really good places to start and help change the dynamic.
So I'm a journalist, so I think of everything in terms of storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that human beings sort of understand the world through story. Do you think the stories around women in finance have a chance to kind of be reframed in this sort of overall narrative? And if so, what do you think that narrative should be? What would that look like?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I think storytelling has been a really important way for us to share the Own Your Worth message. I mean, I could sit up here and, you know, regurgitate all the incredible research and facts and findings that we've done over the last 5 years, and they're very interesting, but I think bringing it into real life context is what's most important. And actually, this event is well timed. Just last week, we launched a new video series where we actually went out and found real people all across the US who are not UBS clients, but just real investors from wherever they might be across the country, to ask them about how they manage money at home. Because we really felt that real life storytelling, that relatability of, you know, this could be your neighbor or your friend or, you know, your colleague at work, could be beneficial. And the stories that we heard were really fascinating. And I think everyone has that sort of own your worth story that they can think of, whether about themselves or the story I shared about my grandmother. We spoke with a couple down in Florida in their 70s, and they fit very much the traditional kind of mold. She stepped out of the workforce when they had children. She was at home, and he was an executive traveling all over the world. And when he was 34, he had a massive heart attack. And he tells the story. He says, I was on the gurney, and the last thought was, if I die, my wife has no idea where any of our money is or where any of our investments are. And since that moment, this was 40 years ago, they have worked toward an equal financial partnership. And they told the story of how they have this binder of everything that they could possibly need to know. Their children, who are now adults, know everything that's in the binder, and sort of the evolution of what was really that crazy scare, and then the lessons that they learned. And of course, you hope that people don't go through those things, but we know that life throws curveballs. So that was one story. We spoke with a husband and wife where she said, honestly, I'm not involved in the finances. And the husband had developed this entire mock scenario in which he was going to fake meet an untimely demise starting on October 1st and step out of all of the financial decisions because he really wanted her to be more involved, which actually is in line with our research.
Dramatic approach.
Very dramatic approach. I'm
you.
curious to see how that will go. But it's interesting because 90% of husbands that we spoke with said that they wished their wives were more involved in the finances, which I think is a pretty powerful statistic. So that speaks to certainly maybe an unconventional way of doing it. But again, those stories I think are really important, but it doesn't always have to be, to your point of how do we change the narrative, it doesn't always have to be, there was this tragic event or terrifying event and this is what we learn from it. It's also, what are the ways in which we're empowered when we own our worth? What decisions does it allow, does that allow us to make in terms of, buying that dream home or paying for children's college tuition or being able to move your elderly loved one into, an assisted living facility that's closer to where you are, whatever it might be. I think that's where if we reframe the narrative, it can be really impactful.
Right. Well, I just have so many more questions for you, especially around what to do with my own finances, which I won't keep to this stage. But let's open it up to the audience. I think we're coming up on a little bit of time here, so I'd love to open it up and see what everyone else wants to know from you, Carey. Such a wealth of knowledge. Oh, here's the mic. There you go.
Carey, I really appreciated all of the information and insights that you gave and ways that women can get involved. And as I sit here, having been in the business for years myself, I'm still wondering why women, millennials, do not get involved. In other words, they can, but what psychologically is blocking them from getting involved, and that just as few and maybe even fewer are as involved as women of my generation? If you could address the psychological element.
Sure, absolutely. And so it's worth noting actually in our research that millennial women and couples actually defer the long-term financial decisions more so than any prior generation. So rather than breaking the status quo, our research has shown that millennial women are actually perpetuating it, which is I think was probably the most staggering thing that we learned. We went back and checked the research over and over and kept finding that and have found it. And I think in terms of why, there's many reasons. Again, some of the ones I've mentioned. I think that there's a big, and we looked at this actually, this big piece of sort of repeating what you saw growing up in your own household. It's much easier to do what you saw, your own mother or father or parent do. In terms of replicating that in your own household versus doing it differently, and that also applies to men as well. If men grew up in a household where their fathers were very involved in the finances, they might feel it is their responsibility. So I think psychologically, it can be hard to broach the conversation too. I think that's a piece of it. I think psychologically, again, sort of we're all figuring life out one day at a time. And so if you have a model for what to do from your own, growing up, it might be easier to repeat that model than figure out how to break from it. So I think that's another piece, but it's really interesting, and it's something that we're continuing to explore. And we actually have a rising generation segment as well, focused on those in their 20s and 30s. But there's this disconnect among millennial women in terms of what they seek to and intend to do versus what actually happens, according to our research. So 88% of single millennial women that we spoke to who had not been married, who were not in a formal partnership, said that if they intended to marry one day or partner one day, they plan to be equally or more involved in the long-term decisions. So that's 88%. And yet among millennial women who are married, 54%, so over half, said they were not involved and let their spouse take the lead. So what is this disconnect between sort of intentions before marriage among millennial women and then what actually happens? And we did a fantastic event last year with a number of different notable women, Billie Jean King and Elaine Welteroth. You may know her on Project Runway, and she was the former editor-in-chief of Teen Vogue, and she talked about the Disney princess syndrome and sort of wanting to have Prince Charming come and save you, as well as all of the different television shows that sort of always represented women as being quote-unquote bad with money. And those are ingrained in us, and I think psychologically that might be a big piece of it too, is this concept of waiting for Prince Charming as opposed to being an equal partner. So that might be one piece, but it is worth mentioning too. Again, we found that half of women aren't involved in the decisions, but half of women in couples are actively involved. And so what does it look like for them, I think, is another big question, and what are the learnings that we can take away to share with other women?
Yeah, did you?
Is this on? Oh, okay. Hello. I'm surprised you haven't mentioned the role of elementary school education in terms of women's self-confidence around finances and money, and the need to bring financial fluency down to elementary level, help women learn it from a really early age. I have found that the argument of the male in the house, the deferring to the male, is actually not as relevant as what happens to a woman when she's a young girl and she reaches that sort of 6th grade age and she decides that she's not good enough. I think that's a really good one. Wondering what your research thought about.
Yeah, and it's a great question, and actually we didn't have time to get to it, but it was one of the questions that we had, so I'm really glad that you asked it, because I do think that financial education from an early age is so important. Only 20 out of 50 states in the US actually have financial education as a core piece of their curriculum in high schools, and even less at earlier ages, which I think is a shame. And it's something that as a firm, we're focused on. We have an entire financial education platform that we partnered with an educational technology company on, and we actually will sponsor schools. And our financial advisors can also bring it to their clients and their schools, and it starts as early as, I believe, age 5 or so, because we know that is really, really important. And I think a lot of the financial confidence piece that we mentioned comes back to this concept, whether it's the misperception that you have to be an expert or the misperception that you have to, it's mathematical, how that impact, you look at women in STEM. I mean, there's so many different things, I think, whether it's the historical context, the societal context. And I agree, I think financial education should be taught in schools much earlier, and also in college as well. I mean, you think about college curriculums are meant to prepare people for the real world, and many colleges never teach those sort of real skills. And actually, in some of our research that we've done, we've learned that some universities are teaching what they call adulting classes, which really go into all of those things. How do you write a check? Why is it important to what does your credit score actually mean? How do you get car insurance? How does a mortgage work? All of those things I think are really important. But then, of course, drilling it down even to earlier levels is really important too, because I think it has a tremendous impact.
I think you have, did someone have the microphone? Oh, great.
So thank you for being here. I'm obviously not a millennial, but I will say that I fit the mold in so many ways of what you're describing, and I think that's what intrigued me about coming. When I was single up until my mid-30s, I had a 401k, I invested my own money, etc. My husband and I married. He's in banking. It's really easy for me to say, you do the finances, because that's your thing. However, he has bugged me and bugged me and bugged me. And we've gone over budget, we've done all those things, and we also, he's way more conservative, I'm much more aggressive. And so I think I've sort of backed off to avoid the the conflict that goes with that. And he wants us to be equal, and he wants that binder. I want the binder now that I've heard about it. So I know we've got our work cut out for us in creating something like that. We're all passwords. Who here can raise their hand and say they know all of their spouse's passwords? I don't. And his are stupid. So, and I would also add that I have a 20-year-old daughter who has had a bank account, had a job, but she says things to me like, I just want to marry you. And I want to slap her upside the head. My mom's worked her entire time she's been alive. I have my own business. And so I'm like, where did you come from? What truck did you fall off? And so I think maybe creating discussions like this for a younger audience, where, bring your daughter to, instead of work, to a discussion like this could be really helpful. Maybe do them in the summertime when kids are home from college. I totally agree with starting education back in elementary school, for all kids to even the playing field.
Yeah.
I mean, if we look at social and the inequities that go on right now, it's largely because some kids just never get the education. My kid got the education. My son got the education because we were pushing on them. We took them to the bank. We showed them how to write a check. We taught all that. So, for what it's worth, those try doing something.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
We have this will be our last question, so make it count.
Thank you all for bringing us together. And I'm just noticing that the tenor of the comments is about how women need to get better. And I think one of the things that UBS is doing, and that I want to see everyone in this room do, is recognize where we've come from. Our economy is linear. It was male designed. We weren't at the table when it was designed, and it's time for us to step in. And with UBS, yes, of course, we need more education at the elementary level, high school level, but we need products that speak to women. We need gender lens products. We need to know that there's women in asset management. Right now, women and people of color combined make 1.3% of those that are choosing our investments. And so I think UBS is already pushing this, and I think that we need more women to stand up and say, this is what we want, so that when we open up our portfolios, every one of our companies has at least some women in leadership. We need that. Our economy needs that, but I think women will be that much more interested in getting involved when we know we're part of the selection committee and we're also part of the
Thank you.
Well, Carey, I feel like I could sit up here for another hour and talk to you about all of our financial well-being questions, but thank you so much for taking the time. This was a really fruitful conversation, and thank you all for your comments and questions, and we'll see you back in about 15 minutes, I believe, for the next part of the program, the panel. So thanks again.
Thank you, Carly, and thanks to the Nob Hill Gazette and to our audience. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Carey Shuffman, head of the women's segment at UBS. Despite not being able to be together in person just yet, our team has been able to offer a series of special virtual events over the last year and a half all as part of our Own Your Worth program focused on women's financial and overall well-being. So stay tuned for some of the highlights from these past events, and we hope you can join us for future events.
For the past 5 years, UBS has been doing some groundbreaking research. We call it Own Your Worth because that's what women need to do.
When you have money, you have freedom, you have mobility, you can take care of your family, you can pay for your children's education. It goes on, and it really, money equals freedom.
It took me till very recently to realize not only could I own my worth, but I was entitled to worth.
Our report shows that women who strive for gender equality believe that money plays a very big role.
I really suggest that, women take more of the time to get away from the stereotypes about math, because that starts very young, that seed gets planted. We have to get away from that, get more into technology and understanding money and managing it.
And I just thought that money and love somehow didn't mix to me. I thought that in order to fully explore love, I had to sort of back off from the money bit because it wasn't romantic to talk about money.
But there still was this fantasy, I think, that even I bought into, and I think a lot of women my age bought into, that there was going to be a man who was going to come and save you, the Disney princess syndrome.
And it really took me till I was probably 40 to realize I was entitled to have ownership of my own life and my own monetized life.
Women know that it's really important to engage in their money. In fact, 80% of women want to participate in decisions.
Bravery is uncomfortable. Stepping out of the things that even though it's time, is uncomfortable.
Being overwhelmed, sadness, fear, anxiety, those are natural responses to things going on. It's how we process it and cope with that we really need the help in.
And some feelings are really hard to feel. They're really uncomfortable. But the secret to being human is that being human isn't about feeling happy. It's about feeling everything.
So I think it's very important for women, even if the male or the partner, whoever takes care of your money, you need to know about it, because you never, ever know in life what's going to happen.
I think what I really learned from the survey is that women need to sort of lean in and take their seat at the money table, while many men need to make room and frankly pull up a chair for women at the table.
If you know about finances, if you learn about your money, if you understand what your contribution is worth, know your worth. And that's what I think we need to let women know.
Own your worth.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. My name is Meredith Westerman, and this is Emily De La Reguera. We lead wealth management offices here in Silicon Valley for UBS Financial Services. First of all, we want to thank our colleague, Carey Shuffman, for the insightful discussion around women and how they can take a seat at the table and get more involved in their financial future. It's such an important topic, and as two females, we could share many stories with you of our mothers, our sisters, and our friends going through very different versions of situations that Carey talked about earlier. We are personally and professionally passionate and committed to ensuring that we and the wealth managers we work with make sure that all of our clients feel empowered to take on their financial future. And my hope is that we leave here feeling inspired to start that conversation.
We are about to move into the second segment of the evening, and this is a really exciting topic, all focused on female entrepreneurship. And I'm excited that this evening we're getting to get to hear from three very, very talented women who have built, exited, and are now empowering rising leaders to take on the difference in capital, to help give them access to more funding, and just a lot of lessons that we can learn from them. Meredith and I, both as business owners ourselves and UBS in general, are really focused and committed to both connecting and supporting women business owners. Unfortunately, as we all know, female founders really only receive a fraction of the funding that is given out. And for minorities, it's even less so, which is really quite sad when you think about it. And in this panel, as I mentioned, we hope that these 3 talented women that you will get to hear from today will be able to share their experiences, again, on how they've built, exited, and are now empowering rising entrepreneurs. And so I'm delighted to welcome each of them back to the stage. So with that, please welcome HILARIE McADAMS, co-founder, a venture partner at NEA, Amber Atherton, who is an executive at Discord and also an angel investor, and STEFANIE ROUMELIOTES, founder and chief executive of SGR Consulting, and of course, our moderator, Carey Schwartz.
Thank you so much for being here, ladies. I just love being around strong, powerful women, and I'm feeding off of this energy. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. I always love hearing about personal stories, almost above all else. I think that's where the richest material comes from. So given all 3 of you are powerhouses in your own right, and having started successful companies, raised money for successful companies, exited successful companies, tell me about what you're working on right now and how that came to be. You want to start? I'll start with Amber.
Yes. Hello, so lovely to be with you all today. My name is Amber Atherton. I'm a lifelong founder up until recently, where my company was acquired by Discord, which is a community software platform, gaming platform, and I'm spending my time currently leading a division at that company, as well as angel investing in a lot of incredible female founders. And a little side project I want to mention today is that I launched an award at the all-girls school that I went to, which is to encourage girls who are aged 11 to 18 to do anything entrepreneurial at all. And you get a cash prize for that, and you get mentoring time, and it's something I hope to roll out to more schools to get girls at any age to have a higher risk tolerance to enter these careers.
That's so wonderful.
Thank you.
Cheers to that. I'll give you some snaps. As a graduate of all-girls school myself, I'm all about lifting up at that age. HILARIE, how about you? Tell us about where you're at in the VC world and the impact it's having.
Yeah, well, I have an unusual story as a venture capitalist. I've been in venture for the last 4 years, having spent the prior 30 years in enterprise tech. I actually came back to the West Coast after graduate school in the late 80s and joined this small startup called Oracle Corporation and spent 18 years there and sort of went from literally the bottom of the company to the top of the company, and then left after 18 years and went to Intuit, where I was an executive at the company, and then went to a much smaller company. And I should mention, when I joined Oracle, it was a $100 million company. When I left, it was $11 billion. So it had seen incredible scale. But I left Intuit to go to another recently minted company, which was Salesforce. And I went and ran the distribution organization for Salesforce for 6 years and took the company to $6 billion. I left that company to go to an even smaller company, a company called New Relic, which we took public a year after I arrived, and I left after 4 years when we hit about $400 million in revenue and a $3.5 billion market cap. So at the end of 30 years, I actually declared a timeout on my operating roles. I'd seen too many miles on airplanes. I had spent a lot of time working, and I actually thought I would just do board roles. And after about 5 months of being at home with my husband, who had retired earlier because somebody had to help with our kids, and we can talk about that because our kids always told their friends we switched gender roles, which I always thought was hysterical. But I actually realized I needed to do something different, and that's when I started talking to venture capital firms. So now I invest in enterprise technology-oriented, small startups, and it's just fabulous. It's the best part of my career. I can't, and part of what I spend time thinking about is how to attract more women into entrepreneurship. And I really wish, when I was 24 years old and I started at Oracle Corporation, that I had thought about starting a company. But that wasn't my ambition at the time. My initial ambition was paying my student loans.
Hopefully that turned out okay.
It turned out all right. My
given
parents
the
were
track
very proud
record you've
of me
mentioned. Thanks so much, Hilary. And Stephanie, you run an incredible company out of this very building. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do and how that came to be?
Yes, I founded SGR Consulting, which is located on the 4th floor of this building. My company offers finance strategy, communications, and crisis management to a number of national organizations and political campaigns across the country. And a little opposite of you, when I was 27, I started the company. I had spent only 5 years in campaign politics, and I knew very quickly that there was a need for more fundraisers in campaign politics. And I also knew that I wanted to work on a multitude of campaigns at one time, and I also wanted to work for organizations that were focused mostly on women, to be honest. And I also noticed that politics was a bit of a boys' club. So in starting SGR at 27, I wanted SGR to be a place where we could recruit and train women into politics or into any industry. And really it's become, it has a reputation now nationally to be a place where people come to learn, to be mentored, and then they move on to do all sorts of good in the world.
Absolutely incredible. Thanks for sharing. So I'll start with Amber and Stephanie then. Both of you have significant experience then raising capital, bringing your companies to big places, starting from very little. When you first started, how did you educate yourself on the process of doing that? And what were some of the first moves you made as a result?
So I started coding when I was maybe 9 or 10, and then started kind of 16, 17, started my first e-commerce company, dropped out of university in London, and raised a seed round. I really had no idea what I was doing. I was going to meetings with my first VCs. I was a solo founder who'd built this sort of e-commerce thing, and I really just made it up as I went along. There wasn't a massive sort of scene like there is here in the Bay Area of other founders, particularly I wouldn't deem myself a technical founder, so I was making a lot of it up, and definitely read Rich Dad, Poor Dad when I was a kid, and just was kind of learning through my mistakes as I went along. Ran that business for a while, ended up merging it with this manufacturing company in Hong Kong where I was born, and then I moved to the Bay Area to do Y Combinator, and I feel like that was a massive step change for me in my own education. Like I was suddenly thrown into a garage in Palo Alto, and I was sort of learning the ropes of, how now am I going to build this business to attract Silicon Valley VC investment? But I think today there are so many resources where you can train yourself, and I think learning from your peers is the best way that I learned, was sort of reaching out to other female founders who'd raised before, and I had the great privilege of working with Kirsten Green, who founded Forerunner, which is an incredible female-founded venture fund here, and she was always very willing to give advice on, how to approach this field. So I think that is how I learned. I sort of self-taught, made a lot of mistakes along the way, and tried to seek out people who are, further along in the path than me, who would be willing to meet me. And I found that most people were open to it. So that's how I learned.
Wonderful. I love to learn from listening too, so maybe I'm taking notes in my head for my own future venture. And how about you, Stephanie?
I think I landed in politics accidentally. I was also, somebody that, I was a dance major at UCLA, so I definitely didn't study political science. But I was raised here in the Bay Area, and I definitely always felt that political breath, and I knew that I wanted to get up every day and do good. And so luckily through my network and coming out of college, I was thrown into a bunch of campaigns. And then a little bit like I said before, I had this need, I had this entrepreneurial spirit, and having been a dance major and having always been on stage and performing, there's this cadence to politics that I loved, and it was short term and it was diversified, and I felt that calling to start my own business, and again to train these women and to be able to create a girls club that I really had I don't have a finance background. I didn't get an MBA. I had mentors, and I had some really good men along the way that pulled me up, and I had some really great women as well, and and I'm grateful for that.
Wonderful. I'm just picturing Kerry Washington on Scandal, like, handling things and having you out in the Bay Area just handling everything. HILARIE, I'd love to return to what you mentioned about being a mom and kind of switching this role with your husband. Motherhood is a huge topic when it comes to women and owning their wealth and running their households versus their careers, and we haven't really touched on that yet today. So can you talk a little bit about your experience as a mom of your 2 daughters and how you've navigated sort of rising through the ranks and through both the financial aspect and just the career aspect of your professional life and what that looks like for you?
Yeah, I think it's a really important topic, and I appreciate the mom that made some comments earlier. I have 2 daughters. One's 24 in her first job, one's 20 in college, and one of my goals as a mother is to unlock their ambition. I haven't been super successful on that front, and the other thing I'd love to teach them is to take the risk to invest, but they're really reticent to invest. And I think this comes back to sort of some of the cultural programming that we're all exposed to. I was at an event with 300 women last week in Washington that was incredibly energizing, a wonderful way to re-enter society, leave my home office. And one of the speakers talked about the fact that young girls are taught to create a budget and save, and young boys are taught to invest and how the mortgage works. And I thought to myself, wow, that's really very true. And if you amplify that across all the other areas of exposure as it relates to sort of financial well-being and long-term planning and wealth creation, which is something that nobody talked to me about when I was a child, you can see why it's hard for the next generation to unlock their own ambition. And so one of the things I tried to do in my career was role model for my daughters that you could do both. The reality is doing both is really, really hard. I had big jobs running multi-billion-dollar divisions when I had young children at home. Thankfully, I wasn't traveling as much as I was later in my career, but one of the decisions my husband and I made was to just split all of our responsibilities 50-50 as best we could. Now, the reality of what ended up happening was we spent a lot of our energy, family energy, on logistics, because you have a lot to organize around a household of 4 people with 2 executives who were starting to travel a lot, and a fabulous nanny, which we were luckily able to afford, primarily because I was working as well. But we did make this important decision when it was actually when I went to Salesforce and I had responsibility for this global organization and was literally traveling every Sunday, coming home Thursday nights, and leaving again on Sunday for the next location, that my husband decided to retire and basically be the primary parent and take care of the family business while I was sort of endeavoring to scale this company. And that was a really hard decision. I think for us, for him, I often say I love him more because he went to LinkedIn and changed his title to stay-at-home dad. And I thought in today's culture, that was a really brave and courageous move. And he was often the only dad at Sacred Heart at the parents' coffees. And I don't think he talked to any of the moms, but but I was always proud of the fact that he took a really active role in our daughters' lives. I now mentor a lot of young women, not as many female founders as I would like. And they have made comments to me that they don't see a way to build a company and be a parent. And I've tried to dissuade them otherwise. And I'm proud to say that one of the female founders that I invested in is in labor today. We're hopefully giving birth to a baby girl, a healthy baby girl later today. Because she made a decision that there was a way, that there was a supporting network, there was a board, there were people who could step out so she could take parental leave. And I also think there's been a wonderful phenomenon where men are taking parental leave. And when my children were born, my husband took 2 weeks of paternity leave. That was not a policy that existed at the company. He basically said, I'm taking 2 weeks of paternity leave, And if you don't want me to come back, that's okay, but I'm still taking my 2 weeks. Now men can take, I think it's 3 months or 4 months. And between two parents, you can have 8 months with a newborn, which is a wonderful thing. So I think the world and our attitudes are more accommodating. I still think there's a lot of work that we need to do in terms of helping women see that there is a path forward to do both.
And just as a follow-up question, I think in the past few weeks alone, I've encountered more than one single woman in her late 30s who, a high-powered career woman who want to embark on the process of having a child, by themselves. What advice would you give to that segment of the population? Because that just seems like such a brave and bold thing to do.
I have friends who have done it, so having a great support network is really important. And if you don't have family in the area where you live, recruiting family, I always like that phrase, it takes a village, outsourcing everything you can, and I think this is an important theme overall, just lowering your standards and being okay with it's not all, the house is a mess, the hair is not colored, all the things that happen, you gain a few pounds. I just think that there is so much pressure on women to be sort of perfect in every way, and if we would relieve ourselves of that pressure, we would take many more risks in our personal lives and in our careers.
Absolutely. Well, moving on to Amber, another question for you. So your startup was recently acquired, congratulations, by a gaming company, of all things. Can you talk about the process of how you went about familiarizing yourself with what I would assume was a seemingly kind of unfamiliar industry, and if you faced any barriers to doing so as a woman who was taking on this leadership role in the gaming world?
Yes, I think I was a bit of an anomaly in YC, which is this accelerator program based out here, where I was always thinking about, what my exit was eventually going to be. Was I going to IPO or was I going to be acquired? And I think more so than perhaps some of my peers, I was already planning what steps I needed to get out and where I needed to be at certain stages of the company's life cycle in order to hit one of those outcomes. So when I started realizing, actually, I think we are going to go the acquisition route, I was proactive about it. So I started speaking to some bankers. I started just setting the field of what would this look like. Because I think a lot of founders think it's just going to happen. You're just going to be bought. And actually that doesn't actually happen that often. You need to create relationships in the field that you work in. You need to know the CEO. You need to know the head of M&A and what their growth strategy is. And I started just networking with different peers within my industry and understanding where there might be alignment. And I happened to know somebody who was on the board of this company, and they had always characterized my company in a similar vein. And I thought, well, maybe this would be an interesting discussion to have. And it was that sort of early work that then led to a very quick kind of process for me. So when I'm speaking to founders who are thinking about, okay, actually, my exit strategy is going to be acquisition. I don't just want to kill my company. I think doing that pre-work is so important, and it's often, there's no education really to founders. It's sort of the model is you build and then you die and that's it. But that doesn't have to be the way for all founders. You can have a successful exit, and I aim to communicate that to more founders who are out there. I think just one other topic I wanted to touch on was just around what you were saying, Hilary, around sort of wealth creation for girls. And I really applaud my father, who did a lot of exercises with me, being like, okay, what type of life do you want, Amber? What do you want to do? Give me the vision board. And I would do all these vision boards. This is what I want to do. And he helped me kind of connect the dots of, okay, if you want to do that, this is what you're going to need. This is how much money you're actually going to need. And that basic exercise was so useful to me. And then figuring out, okay, so what's my risk I can have? I can do some real estate investing. I can do some share investing. I can save. And I do actually those exercises with my friends today who are in their early 30s and who haven't really ever thought about that. And so I just wanted to share that as for anybody in the room who has young daughters. It's just worth worthwhile exercise of, this is where you want to be and this is how you can connect the dots to get there.
So sort of an analog Pinterest
Yeah.
of where you want to
Exactly,
build your...
analog Pinterest, I love it.
Yeah, what is this offline vision board? It sounds such a novel concept. Stephanie, you have tremendous experience as a high-level strategist raising capital for some of the biggest names in politics. What advice would you give to other women looking to raise significant funds for their causes? You also have experience raising for nonprofits, for example. I mean, I'd imagine that's a really intimidating prospect for, to raise money of the caliber that you've done. What advice would you give?
Yes, my firm's raised $500 million, I believe, in the last couple of decades. And so the capital that we raise, I didn't have to raise that capital for my own little business at the time because we were scrappy and I had moved in with my parents and I was 27. But then every single organization that I worked with or every single campaign, we had to raise that capital. And really, there was no room for failure. And so a lot of times, I believe that men can fail upward and women don't always get that same luxury. So whether, it's especially for organizations that are, women focused, for example, Futures Without Violence, which is focused on domestic violence and trauma and behavior. I mean, they saw during this pandemic, Esta Solar, who runs the organization, was at the heart of the CARES Act, really negotiating for children and women. So, my advice for women that are trying to raise capital is to take risk, which you just said, and I think that I've been pulling some of these key words that both of you have mentioned because that Pinterest board that you said, we map out relationships. So whatever you're raising for, you must believe in it, first of all. Then you must really map out your own personal relationships and professional relationships. Figure out who you can really go to, how much you can really raise from that network. And then, of course, probably hire a professional, right? Because, if you're not a lawyer, you're not going to lawyer for yourself. So, this is definitely something where asking for help as women and having that network to ask for help, because I do think it takes a village. And I actually, in terms of our daughters, I have one. I have twins. I actually didn't take a maternity after I gave birth to twins because I own my own business in politics, which is male-dominated. But it's really important, and the way I see it for women is they need to invest in themselves before they can figure out other ways to invest for their future. So in my own firm and in politics and in these organizations, and when I'm helping women figure out how to raise money, I constantly remind them to invest in themselves.
Do you think it's harder for women to have the courage to ask for help? Or do you think that's something that comes more naturally to, or is it not worth sort of generalizing? Because I think that's a really poignant piece of advice that you're offering here.
I think that we're a bit more bashful, right? We assume that, will we look weak if we need help? And then if we have the strength or we're bold enough to ask for that help, who are we asking? Who can we trust to ask? Do we have a network to ask? I'm raising capital funding, right, in tech. This is why it's so important what you do for women, right, which you've done as a woman. It's not done a lot. One example is I had the privilege of, I still do. I serve in the C-suite of a data company. And we raised $10 million in seed funding in the last election cycle. And as a private company, there were other competitors. And those competitors were men, and they were famous men in tech. And they were heavily already funded by men who had money. It's 35 million, 65 million, 75 million, and we were women created, women run. And we had only 10 million with a very clear vision of what we needed to do. And it took a very long time to raise that 10 million because we were competing against the giants. But we had each other, and we had a network, and we had a proof point. And that's the other thing is, as women, when you deliver, right, when you raise money on for a product or an organization or a campaign, again, there's not a lot of room for failure, right? I know in tech, disrupting is something and it's okay to fail, but I think for women we're held to a different standard.
Yeah. I totally agree with you on the failing upward and the sort of double standard there, but it's really refreshing to hear that perspective. Let's go back to sort of a more basic question then. We've been talking about and kind of dancing around the issue of the various challenges women face in navigating their careers. I'd love for each of you to share a story or a moment or some reflections on significant challenges that you've faced along the way due to being a woman, or because you believe that gender played a role in that, and if so, how you went about surmounting that. And we can start with whoever wants to jump in.
I mean, I'll share that being a non-technical woman in tech companies early on was a huge disadvantage. And I started my career as a product manager and got a lot of feedback that you didn't go to Caltech, you didn't go to MIT, so you're not technical. And even when I started in the industries, computer science degrees were newly minted. Most people were double E's that were going into software. So I had the wrong degree, and I actually made a conscious decision because of this feedback that I kept getting. You're doing great, but you're not technical. To move to a sales role, to running a sales organization, because I was interfacing as a product leader with customers, with our salespeople. And frankly, I couldn't believe how much they didn't know about our products. So I moved there, and I realized that in that setting, there was a very clear report card. It was really binary. As a woman, it didn't matter what degree I had. It really mattered what my performance looked like. And for me, finding that sort of meritocracy within the tech arena really unlocked a lot of my potential. And I think had I stayed in product, there would have been this sort of bias around my performance because the degree and the technical skill set, which, you know, in retrospect, I really should have fought that concept, because what you studied up to age 21 does not dictate what the rest of your amazing life looks like. And I don't know why we carry these stereotypes, other than it's a great filtering system when you're hiring a bunch of people fresh out of school. Yeah. You know, but it should not hold you back for the rest of your career. So that was a very big moment for me, and frankly, it worked out.
I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah.
How about Amber or Stephanie?
Yeah, I would just say I recall a conversation with a friend maybe 15 years ago, and he was telling me about Bitcoin and crypto, and I was like, oh, I'm not really in that world, so, you know, I'm just going to leave you. And now it's so interesting working at Discord, where a lot of the Web3 crypto conversations are happening. And I think, you know, the old adage goes, you become like the 5 people you spend the most time with. And now that I'm spending all of my time in a very like male-dominated product and ecosystem where we're talking a lot about crypto, you know, I'm making much bigger, riskier investments. And I started doing that, I suppose, when I changed my circle, like moving out to the Bay Area. And so I think that, I guess the lesson there to share is just to be open to the arenas where these conversations are happening. And you might be an outsider, and you have to be brave to just be part of the conversation. And I think, you know, Carly, we were talking earlier about the fact that, you know, there are tools now that maybe not designed for women, but yeah, you can use Robinhood, yeah, you can use Coinbase, like you can go and make your own bets and be part of the conversation that's happening on Twitter and Discord. So I think the lesson is to just be brave and be part of those conversations, even if it's not, you know, very female audience.
And Stephanie, how about you? You're in such a male-dominated field. I'm so curious as to how you've navigated that.
Yes, I mean, I definitely think also in campaign politics, and even I would say nonprofit world, like fundraising is a pink lane. It's primarily woman-dominated. And part of that is that when men are in that lane, they do one stint on one campaign and then they move on in a big way. Their trajectory is quick and it's upward. Women tend to be put in that lane and kept in that lane. So for the last, you know, I mean, I remember, well, I guess 20 plus years, you know, I'm told all the time, well, you know, you're a fundraiser, you don't know. So for me, it was always about, how am I going to exit fundraising? You know, I've been trying to exit fundraising for 20 years, right? It's like, you know, every day I'm exiting fundraising. But instead, it's this powerful tool because it is the underbelly of so much of what we do in our society. I mean, now even in our public life, we need philanthropic dollars for partnerships to even educate our kids or have summer school programs or, think about all the things that we do where the fundraising piece, the philanthropic piece, the political piece is so important. So I think that's been a big challenge of mine. I would say that I haven't overcome it. I face it every day. But what I have been able to do is make sure that I've convinced the big guys that there is something called finance strategy and relationship strategy, and that deserves a seat at the table. And that when we have a seat at the table, we don't just put the gas in the tank and then someone else drives the car, but that we're able to put the gas in the tank and then also have a say in where the car is going, in those budgetary decisions that are so critical to, to the success of an organization or the success of a campaign. So that's something that, it's ongoing for me.
Absolutely. So HILARIE, we were talking at the break about women entrepreneurs and how few of them there are compared to their male counterparts. And as a result, so much research shows that women are far less likely to have their startups acquired than their male counterparts. How do we bring more women into the founders field?
Well, I think there are a couple things. One starts with asking young women, what company would you build if you could? And I don't think many of us ask that question and set an expectation with that young woman that that's an option for them. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, no one asked me this question. I thought I was going to work for AT&T or the Federal Reserve when I grew up. I had no real concepts for what one could do, but sometimes these very sort of random questions that family friends or trusted advisors or mentors that you talked about, Stefanie, the questions they ask us stay in our heads and it makes us think, well, what did she see in me that she asked that question, and why would I start a company? And if I were to start a company, what would that look like? I think that's step one. Step two is to have role models like Stefanie and Amber who have started companies, who have taken the risk. And maybe they've failed and maybe they've succeeded, but they've taken the risk. And I have an adage around this sort of aversion to failure that I think a lot of women carry, which is life is a numbers game. And from one no to the yes, right? Just as a path to the yes. So to encourage people to recognize that whether you're asking for money for philanthropic reasons or you're fundraising, you'll get a lot of no. But how you manage that no, how you think about that, is it rejection of me or is it just a numbers game and I need to move on to the next potential funder, I think has a lot of bearing on how people feel about the process. I think the other piece that we have to do for women is make it safe to start a company, because starting, every company I've been with, and people always say to me, wow, you've had such remarkable companies, what an amazing career. Every single one of those companies had a moment where they didn't think they were going to succeed, like a material moment. And teaching young women that it's a roller coaster ride where maybe the bar comes undone and you're about to fly out of your seat, and that's okay because you'll figure out a path forward. And I love your visualization of, public company selling my company. That's the type of contingency planning that we all do. So when we're in those moments, we know what to do. And teaching young women how to do that, role modeling for them that it's okay. I tell a lot of young entrepreneurs stories about, hey, when I was at Oracle, this horrible thing happened. I joined Salesforce, and 3 months later, in 2008, the global economy, was destroyed. And I asked myself, why did I make this move at this time? Teaching people how you rebound from those situations actually gives them the resilience and the grit and their insight into themselves so that they can build really, really robust companies. So I think part of it is, it's a lot of this visualization of how to do it. I think all of us own this process by asking the young women we know the same questions that we ask the young men that we know. And even I have to check my words when I ask my daughter's boyfriend, hey, what's your internship gonna look like this summer? I need to remember to say to her, and what about yours?
Yeah.
And her friends, and set that expectation that of course they would have fabulous internships, right?
Absolutely.
That's where it starts.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to open it up to the audience after one more question. Again, I feel like we could just talk about this for hours, but I'd love to talk a little bit about what women you're watching these days. Who inspires you? Research recently found that more money is pouring into the Bay Area, for example, more than any other region of the country when it comes to supporting startups, supporting ventures. Are there any local women who you're inspired by and who you think are worthy of watching and learning from?
Yes, I will shout out a female founder I just invested in. She has a lab-grown meat company, and she is a solo female founder creating an incredible lab-grown Wagyu steak business called Ohio Valley. So her name's Jess Krieger, lives out in Berkeley, amazing. There's just so much incredible talent. I think it's an amazing time to be a female founder. I think there are more funds than ever before that are seeking out diverse founders who don't necessarily have a technical background. So it is about just increasing the risk tolerance and that it's okay to fail, and failure doesn't mean it's the end. You're just going to learn from it. So I would shout out Jess, and I would also shout out two other friends of mine, Alice Lloyd-George, who founded her own VC fund and has raised her own fund, and Yasmin Razavi, who's also another venture investor who works at Spark Capital. And these are incredibly smart, not necessarily technical women who are out there leading. So there's amazing people out there.
I have three. One is Laura Chambers, who's the CEO of Willow, the wearable breast pump. And I think she's so important to mention because femtech has become a really interesting category. And I think we heard the comment earlier that 51% is not a segment, it's a population. You know, there are a lot of women investing in products designed for women. The second is Sarah Fryer, who maybe people in this room know. She's the CEO of Nextdoor, which is about to go public. She lives in Marin County, and I had the pleasure of working with her at Salesforce and then at New Relic, where she was on my board. And then the third one, the company's gone public, but it's really worth calling out, is Michelle Zaitlin, who's the co-founder of Cloudflare, which is a relatively recent public company in the tech market that has all the makings of an iconic company, right? They're in the early innings of what will be an amazing company. And she and Matthew Prince, who met at Harvard Business School, co-founded that company. Michelle is the COO, Matthew is the CEO, and I put all the money in the world on the two of them for what they're building.
Very cool. And how about you, Stephanie?
I mean, mine's a little different, obviously, because it's, you know, I'm not going to get political, but not supposed to. You know, listen, for the first time ever, we have a woman vice president in this country. So I'm hopeful in politics. No matter what the party is, it's a great thing for women. And, you know, I think a lot of talent has come out of the Bay Area, and that's really obvious. I'm really excited about some of the women that I know that are coming up behind the scenes in politics. And that's really important because these women are gritty. They come into, you know, they've worked in male-dominated arenas, and they have fought hard for their seat at the table. One of them is my good friend, Kristen Bertolina, and she is the campaign manager for Senator Alex Padilla. And again, like I said earlier, a couple of good men along the way. You know, Alex really wanted her to be his campaign manager, and she is really a fundraiser, and now she will move on to be really a general strategist. You know, I live in the Bay Area, and I get to be close to a couple of moms that are in tech. So I don't know if she's going to be mad at me for saying this, but I love Emily Choi. She's president of Coinbase, and I think that she is amazing, and she's already investing in a lot of startups and companies, and I'm just privileged to be near her. And when she posts on Twitter, and I guess I'm saying this because it's important to like follow these people because they post, and then you get to learn. Like you get to learn about how they, like how does Coinbase do business, or how do they face obstacles? And I think it applies to so much of what we do in our other industries. So I always think we live in the land of innovation, and I think there's lots of women to come.
Absolutely. Well, I'm thinking of folks I want to interview for the Knobhill Gazette now, so thank you for helping me populate future editions. Let's open it up to the audience.
Of course, that would happen to me. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed this event. So I have a question for HILARIE. You have two daughters, one in college and one that's a professional career. As they're entering a professional career, becoming more independent, and look back at your career, that is, what piece of advice would you share with them that you wish you had when you were
It's a great question. I mean, the one piece of advice I do instill in them every week is life is a numbers game. Like, I really want them to depersonalize some of the rejection that we all feel in life. And I think if they can do that, and I think a lot of men do that, I think that's what we talk about as we reference failing up, that they'll be stronger and they'll be more resilient. The thing that I tell them often is that they can be CEOs. I sometimes regret looking back that I didn't take that chance. And people ask me all the time, why are you not the CEO of a company? And at this point, I'm making a life choice. I'm in my late 50s, and it would be an all-in 100-hour-a-week kind of thing that I just don't want to do anymore. But had I thought about it and unlocked that ambition earlier, I probably would have taken a CEO role. And I'd love to see my daughters decide on an industry where they want to make an impact and change the world. And that's part of what I want to, if I could unlock one thing, it would be this sense that they can have an impact and change the world. Do I speak for all the moms?
Yes.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to say how interesting it is to hear all your stories. It's great. It's very inspiring. As a young CEO of the company, my question is, what do you look for in a pitch when having a project?
Amber.
Oh, gosh. I try and concentrate very specifically on frontier consumer companies. So I'm looking for companies in that sector, and I'm looking for why are you as the founder the best person to build this business? Mm-hmm. Why? And why through all the ups and downs of the roller coaster, you being thrown off, like how can you show that you're going to have the grit to continue, and also I think have the ability to show a bit of vulnerability that you don't know at all. I think there's this misconception that you need to be really gung-ho and you know everything and you know exactly what's going to happen in your roadmap in the next 18 months, but having a little bit of kind of humbleness that actually you don't know, I think is a great sign.
To add on to that, I love when people are trying to either reinvent a category or define a new category. And the classic example I use is the iPhone. No one, we talked about a mobile phone. No one really thought about an internet device in your pocket with your whole life on it, right? And that is a new category. That's not a reinvention of a category. But the other really successful models have been when you're redefining the rules in an existing category. So I look for that. Often we invest so early that we don't actually know if things will work. So that's where the people make a huge difference, and you're looking for the grit. I do notice that women tend to lay out more of the risks in their pitch, and men don't. And so as much as you probably feel pressure when you're pitching to talk about the downside scenarios. You know, the dirty little secret is most men don't. They might get asked that question, but they wouldn't actually put it in their pitch. And so to have the confidence to go there if you have to, but just be comfortable with the vision and the fact that maybe there are some flaws in the vision, but you'll figure those out.
I'm good.
Great. Anyone else? Questions?
Is it wrong to say I would prefer 8 more hours of this? Thank you to all of you on the stage this evening. You're truly inspiring. And my question actually is spurred by what Stephanie was saying earlier, and you mentioned investing in yourself. So my first question is for each of you, name a tool to invest in yourself. I know it's an ambiguous question, but I'd love to hear an example from each of you. And number 2, maybe we flip this order. First question is, how did you overcome an obstacle being a woman in each of your industries? And then the second question is, name a tool for yourself.
Oof. I just have a lot of guts, I think. I think that's, I like, those boys inspire me to do better and go. You guys would be probably better at this. Yeah, it just takes a lot of guts. And also I would say that for me, it's, someone said to me the other day, Stephanie, you have like 100% batting average. I had never thought about it before. Mm-hmm. So now I want 110% batting average. Because, and like I said before, I haven't overcome anything when it comes to politics, but I certainly am proud of the fact that I have helped finance strategy deserve a seat at the table with the big guys.
My investment in myself started about 15 years ago, and it was really around health because I was leading this crazy life. So I hired a trainer. I don't have a trainer anymore, except I have Peloton. And I am religious about it. 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week.
Great.
No excuses, get it done. And I feel so great after my workouts, and I have such perspective that makes a big difference. My whole career, I've been the only woman in the room. It's really only changed in the last 5 years. And I would say I just got very comfortable. It sounds similar to what Stephanie is saying, marching to my own beat and not trying to fit in with the men that I worked with who frankly saw me as an outsider and would make comments like, well, my wife and I were lucky enough that she didn't have to work, which is an appropriate statement in some ways, but it really implied that I didn't love what I was doing, which I did. So just being comfortable that you don't fit in with the dudes that you work with, and also feeling comfortable that when you're on campus with your kids, that you might not fit in with the moms, too. And that can be really painful at times, but it's okay. Because if you're comfortable that you're an entrepreneur of your life and your life's journey, it doesn't hurt. It just is what you do. And frankly, most people, I think, would benefit from that approach and not worrying quite so much about fitting into whatever circle you might think you aspire to fit into.
Yeah, great question. I would say on the obstacle front, I find that just not internalizing obstacles or like thinking of things as failures in your life is so important. Like you just don't have the mental bandwidth to think about whether whether it did go the way you wanted or not. It just happened. You've got to keep moving forward. So I really resonate with what Stephanie was saying is you just have this relentlessness where you're like, oh, well, why bother spending time thinking too much about, that obstacle? Like we need to move forward. Like let's just keep going. So I think I've always tried to harbor that mindset of like, well, let's just move forward. And then I think on the sort of nourishing in yourself, something that I did over the pandemic is I got a philosophy tutor, and every Sunday I do a philosophy lesson with this philosophy tutor, and I absolutely love it because it's just an amazing learning time for me, and I continue to do it now, and I now want another tutor, and I find that very motivating to just keep learning.
I thought this through. I think one of the tricks to the trade of fundraising for me is that I don't like the word no. So in everything I do, it's about mapping how to get to yes. And so whether that's with my peers or those that are above me in my industry, or whether it's fundraising with an investor or with a donor, it's how do we get to yes? And that's the mantra.
I love that.
So I agree with the whole fundraising. Everybody needs to be a fundraiser at one point in their life. You're always selling something, right? Yourself or business or whatever it is that you're doing. Hindsight is kind of 20/20 as well. If you had known that your male counterparts were raising 10 times more than you in your current business, would you have raised that amount, or would you set out a strategy to set a certain level of capital?
Mine's unique because I didn't raise the capital for my own company, although I hope one day I get to have a different company and raise that capital. And women are in that fundraising lane in politics. So a lot of times, though, male candidates and male-dominated organizations raise a lot more money. And women, especially women of color, have a really hard time raising money. And so, yeah, I mean, especially like in a California market, it takes quite a bit of money to win. So you don't have the luxury of raising less. And that goes back to figuring out a way to yes and figuring out how to compete with your male counterparts when raising capital.
Yeah, I would say that I just didn't really think about what my male peers were doing. I just sort of knew what I needed to do, and I just focused on doing it. But having said that, I was obviously aware. I was like, wow, the male founders around me are raising, much more money. Why? And I remember, I just want to recall this anecdote. If anybody in the audience is familiar with a band called Florence and the Machine, this is an English band. I once had the pleasure of sitting opposite Florence at a dinner, and we somehow got into this conversation about how much she charges to perform. And she said, in the early days, what I used to do is I used to just say, add 3 more zeros. Just add 3 more zeros. And that sounds quite basic, but actually there's a lesson, I think, underneath it of just think without limits. Why are you limiting yourself to only raise 10 million? Why are you not raising, what is it going to be for 100 million? And so I think there's a lesson to try and do these exercises of thinking without limits. And of course you're going to do it.
I think whenever I've identified that a man is raising more, or has more capital in their company, or has a higher compensation than me, it's inspired me to ask for more and sort of realize that I should have been thinking bigger, to Amber's point. And so I think it's a great data point, and sometimes you can't get access to the same level of capital, but trust me, you can still win. You just need a better getting to yes strategy.
Just soaking this in. I feel so empowered. I'm gonna just focus on yes for the rest of my life. I think we have time for maybe one more question, and then we can move on to the reception. Is there anyone else who wants to ask something? We have one over here.
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for all your presentations. It was such a pleasure, and in all senses, how you presented it, what you achieved, how you look, and all together. So talking about looking, it's another aspect of a woman entrepreneur and women in science like myself or business. Many don't think that women in this position should possibly pay too much attention to looks, but at the same time, they all know the perception. So my question is, do you, as an entrepreneur yourself, do you have, I know many fashion designers, especially young, just again starting, and I'm wondering if any of you have any collaboration or work together with any of young startups, I would say fashion design, beauty, whatever, and what is your opinion and how do you think you can help them? Because I know many who really can set up, especially if they would be in cooperation with women like you.
I'm happy to take that on. I think especially in politics, image matters. We know this, and women are criticized far more than men, right? Men can have the same exact suit, same exact color, 5 of them hanging in their closet for 5 days a week. And literally, I know a few that do that. And the women are, oh, you need to lose weight, or your hair needs to be cut to here, or you're not this, you're not that. I think you mentioned it, Hilary, when I had twins, I had gained quite a bit of weight, and it's a really insecure feeling, right, when you don't feel good about yourself. In my spare time, not related to what I do for a living, I'm actually a brand ambassador for a women's workwear line called Argent. I'm actually wearing the suit. And thank you for asking the question. And I love Argent because, quite frankly, it was created here in San Francisco by women. It's now based in New York, but it's really affordable, and it's this woman's workwear where it has like pockets. You don't have to like carry a purse, and this is the kind of thing where you need like a versatile workwear, right? I may not have the same colored suit in my closet 5 times, but it's great to just have like Argent in my closet and know that there's X amount of colors, and I can switch them out as I go. I also work with an organization called Dress for Success, and as many of you know, there's many affiliates all over. There's one here in San Francisco. Just here, they've helped employ 7,000 women, and it's based really on helping these women feel good about themselves, right? Like how they look, how they dress, offering them a boutique to go and find something to wear. And this is really, it plays into our confidence. So, I also have a lot of young women that work for me, and they come straight from college, and they usually spend anywhere from 5 to 10 years with me. So I definitely try to help the women that work for me. Own their own identity, but remind them that it matters.
I don't actually invest in the consumer arena, but some of my partners do. And one of the things I've noticed is that consumer goods are often great for female entrepreneurs. So whether it's makeup or fashion, there are fewer barriers of entry to some of the ones I discussed in tech. And it's a great way, if you feel entrepreneurial, to get out there. Last week I saw Bobbi Brown speak. She has a new makeup line. I think it's called Jones Road. But she talked a little bit about building Bobbi Brown and then selling Bobbi Brown, I think, to Estee Lauder, and then recreating her next company. And she's one of the great entrepreneurs that I admire. So I think it's a great category for women to embrace. I do think there's a ton of pressure on women to look great. I think part of it is a brand statement about who you are, how you dress. But I do think there's more pressure on women than men, and hopefully at some point we'll outgrow that.
I would just add that I actually feel like I do wear a uniform. Like I have my sneakers, I have my skate top, I have this suit, embarrassingly, in 5 different colors, and I literally just wear this and roll out. But it is funny, having lived in London and New York and then moved to Palo Alto, just the huge shift in style. And I think, working in tech, and particularly now in a gaming company, I'm rolling out of bed and just sometimes wearing my pajama top and going, and because I feel grateful for that, because there isn't an expectation for me to look a certain way. I can just get on and do work. And so I think that is a benefit sometimes working in tech, that yes, out there in the world, not having to think about it too much and focusing is key.
Here's one of the good things too, which I love that you said this about Palo Alto. Obviously a lot of folks come to the Bay Area to raise capital, philanthropically, politically, in business. So I'm just loving like the male politicians that are coming to town, and they're so uncomfortable. They're like, do I wear my suit? Do I wear my tie? Do I wear jeans and button down? What do I do, right? And it's like, I'm like, this is great, because Silicon Valley disrupts, and now we're actually disrupting the male politician's brain on what their image is. So I love it. I think it's fantastic.
That's awesome. Couldn't agree more. Well, thank you so much, all three of you, for your insights and expertise. This concludes our panel. Let's give another round of applause to Amber, Hillary, and Stephanie. And thank you again to Carey for our original talk and our wonderful co-presenters at UBS for kicking off this event. And many thanks to our supporting sponsors, BDS Law Group and Peninsula Bay Trust. Once again, I'm Carey Schwartz. I'm editor-in-chief of the Nob Hill Gazette and the San Francisco Examiner. And this has been Own Your Worth, our latest in an ongoing series about women and wealth. And for more, you can visit our website at nobhillgazette.com. So thank you. And finally, thank you so much to our hosts here at the Julia Morgan Ballroom, one of my favorite venues here in the city. Hopefully you can join us in the bar and lounge afterwards for some bubbles and bites before we head out for the evening. So thanks again.